we go.
Here we go.
All right, Alexis, we just got done with a great conversation with Aaron Walsh.
Yep.
He's in New Zealand, and he works with high-performing athletes around mental fitness. And with where we're at as a society here in the U.S., with all the pressures that we're feeling with COVID, with the pressure in the business, with pressure within our families and ourselves at home, there's a lot going on, and it's been a tough year. I think we'd all admit to.
Yeah.
Mental health and wellness is at the top of, I think, everybody's mind.
Yeah.
This is a very important topic, and I would tell everybody it's a very important episode. I will go back and listen to this multiple times because the amount of knowledge that he passed on how to think about your what I'd call mental fitness was tremendous.
Yep.
And I have a ton of takeaways. So it's a different topic than we typically do. It's a little bit of a curveball.
It's a great curveball.
But it is.
Oh, good sports.
Yes.
Analogy
good sports
there.
analogy.
Yeah.
But even if you're not an athlete or somebody who's really into fitness, it's not about that. It's about how do you reach your full potential, and specifically, how do we normalize mental health? And I think it's just an absolutely important question that we should be asking all of ourselves.
Yeah, super important. And today I found out that I am mentally weak.
You haven't been working the muscle out?
I guess not. No. You think you are.
Yeah.
And then after listening to this, you're like, wow, I got a long ways to go.
Yeah. What I think the number one takeaway I had is it's a skill that can be learned.
Yeah.
It's a skill that can be learned. And if you take the stigma away from mental health, and you really think about, and I talk a little bit about my journey, but my thoughts on this is once that goes away and shame comes out, and you actually really look at it for what it is, which is a skill to be learned, man, it changes everything. It changes your whole approach. And it makes it realistically that, hey, I can make a change here for the better. But it takes work, it takes discipline, it takes effort. But just like anything else, it's something that you can learn.
Absolutely. I mean, my mind was blown the entire episode. I had crazy eyes the entire time. So enjoy that.
I was like, I don't have any notes. I wish I could write something down.
No
but
kidding.
Luckily, this is recorded, so I can listen to it.
Planned ahead.
Anyways, for everybody who wants to learn how to reach your full potential.
And mentally fit.
And be mentally fit.
Can we edit that out? I feel...
No, that was great. That was a great flex. Mentally fit. Anyways, Aaron Walsh, everybody.
All right, Drew.
Got an interesting topic today, which is really around well-being and I would say mental health and mental fitness. And we have a great opportunity to interview somebody who's all the way on the other side of the world in New Zealand.
No, I'm in the real south. Like, this is the deep south.
Oh, you're in the
deep south.
That's
there
right,
we go.
Aaron. That's right.
Yeah.
But Aaron, I'll let him introduce kind of his background. But Aaron works with high performing athletes in several disciplines, but rugby in particular. And Aaron, I didn't mention this earlier when we were talking, but I played rugby for a few years.
Oh, good man.
In college. Don't ask me any questions because I don't remember much of it. Played in college, and you can imagine U.S. rugby is not the same as like real rugby. But anyways,
I imagine the post matches are pretty similar.
Yeah.
The game itself might be a little bit different.
That's right. Anyways, so we'll get into that, but really has focused on the mental part of the sport, and helps coach high performing athletes and some of the highest performing athletes in New Zealand. And so real fortunate to have him. And so we're going to go through and talk a little bit about the mental part of all of our lives, whether you're a high-performing athlete or you're an associate in a store or in a distribution center or you work here in the office. That's one thing that we can all relate to is mental health and physical health. So we're going to talk a little bit about wellness today, personal wellness. But Aaron, you want to just talk a little bit about your background and specifically the role that you have today and what you do with athletes?
Yeah. My background is obviously I'm a New Zealander. I actually spent a lot of time in the US. My wife is from New Haven, Connecticut. My children have US passports, and I lived in KCMO for quite a while.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so I do have a pretty deep connection with the US. My parents actually live in Santa Maria, just up from Santa Barbara on the California coast.
Beautiful.
And so I was just saying to Justin before this pandemic has been challenging. We haven't seen them for about 3 years.
Oh, wow.
We had all these plans and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully that ends soon. So, you know, first of all, like my first real exposure to performance was through rugby. So I grew up very much in the rugby world and all of the stuff associated with that, which is it's a pretty intense and grueling sport, which I absolutely loved. And I suppose how that marries in with what I do today, I felt like I was a classic case, which you hear so many times, particularly in the athletic world, of someone had high potential but didn't translate that to performance. And it sort of sent me on this journey of exploring as to why that was the case. And it sort of reminds me of a story which sort of really landed in my mind of the reason around why I do what I do. Is I was at a spring training in 2003, so I've done some work in baseball as well. And I was talking to a head of player development of one of the major league clubs. I think it might have been either the Royals or Giants. And I was asking them the question, you know, you see 200 or 300 of these young men out on the field, and they're all they look like all gods, right? They've great physique. They all throw the ball a million miles, hit it forever. And I just asked a question, just an observation question. I said, so how many of these young men will make it to the big leagues? And the guy said, and I don't know if it's the same now, but back then he said, around 3% of people who get drafted actually play in the big leagues.
Wow.
And I sort of asked the question, which was, well, they all look the same. What's the difference? And he sort of said it as an off comment. He said, it's all about the top 2 inches, mate. We didn't say mate, he's American. I said pal, buddy. So it's all about the top 2 inches. And the next question I asked, well, how much time do you dedicate to developing that? And he said, none.
Wow.
And it was sort of this moment, and it's changed now. Baseball has certainly progressed from that. It was sort of this moment that combined, I suppose, my own personal journey, my observation in a professional context, that sort of shaped where I see the mental side of life fitting, which is everybody has a certain level of capability, but not everybody is able to deliver on that. And often that gap between capability and delivery is not physical or technical or even tactical. It's often mental.
Yeah.
And so I live in that space with athletes and teams about how do we take you, or how do we translate what you're capable of into actual performance? And can we examine why you seem to have all these capabilities, but we never see them when it matters? And so that sort of has sent me into this lifelong relationship with pressure, which is sort of what I deal with, what I help with, what I look at. And so it was certainly it's a very unusual occupation, and it's a very unusual subject to explore, because as you know, that as a species, we're hardwired into us to avoid pressure, because pressure is where threat exists, and threat is what could possibly kill us. So it takes a certain amount of skill, not just personality type, but actual skill, to be able to, you know, almost overtake our hardwiring and walk towards pressure rather than trust our natural instincts, which would be to walk away.
Yeah. Man,
Wow.
That's my world. I live in that. That's my world.
That's fascinating.
That is fascinating. You know, one of the things, Aaron, that we've noticed in the U.S. is mental health is becoming normalized. It's a conversation that is now more free for people to have and to be comfortable having around. Whether that's in real life or even in sports. We just saw Simone Biles in the Olympics and some of those challenges. It's a conversation that we're trying to have more and more of. And I love how you say that, and we've mentioned this actually on the podcast, that reaching your full potential a lot of times is limited by yourself. It's those self-narratives that you tell yourself, or from a performance perspective, you limit yourself based on your full potential, based on the pressure that you feel and not being able to overcome that.
Yep.
But that's such a relevant topic today. If you think about, you know, individuals in high pressure situations across the company, we got a lot going on. We got a pandemic. We got customers that are leaning on us.
Hurting.
Yeah. And we have associates that need us as well. So, you know, the pressure is definitely there. On that note, if we can just dive right into kind of how you approach that. But first, before we get into like the tactics of it, how has the mental side of the game changed in the past 5 or 10 years? Like, have you seen a shift?
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is, it's very interesting to me. So I sort of clarify, if you could just allow me to sort of venture into that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, go for it.
Space is that, maybe we could look at the 90s and 2000s were sort of the year of the decades of strength and conditioning. Like the world just exploded with what the body was capable of and experts and all of that. And then, I think 2010 through 2020 has been really the decade of coaching, of how do we actually coach people better. But I think the 20s onwards are going to be about mental performance.
Interesting.
Because everyone I talk to, so this is sort of an interesting side. So everyone I talk to would value. So I did a survey that I'm doing as part of a master's thesis that I'm in at the moment. I did a survey with a number of professional coaches, and I asked them how much value, or how much do you think the mental side contributes to overall performance? And all of them said massive amounts, massive amounts. And then I asked them the second question: how many? Do you have an expert in your environment, and how often do they engage to train this area? And it was sort of came back with about 12% of teams have one, and the average engagement is 3 hours a week. And so this difference between actualized and perceived value is where this gap exists. So part of my research right now is I'm looking at the normalization and integration of mental skills into elite teams. And the reason I say that, it's not about research. We have more research than we know what to do with around what the brain does and what happens under pressure. Yeah. What we don't have is very good practices that are integrated into teams that allow them to treat the mental side of life like a skill that they can grow, rather than a personality trait that is fixed.
That's so good.
So it's a really different approach.
Yeah.
So most people, I would say the predominant approach up the last couple of years is what I call a deficit model. So we have someone in the building when things go wrong.
Yeah.
So only the sick get well. It's the ambulance at the bottom of the hill.
Right.
What I've been observing and sort of massively shouting from the rooftops in my part of the world is we need to transition to a skill model. And so if you talk about a skill model, we talk about having the right information, having the right practices, and having the right support to grow an area, whether that be. So you think a skill model with a nutritionist, you go find out what you should be eating, you get the tools to do that, and then the support. So yeah, mate, it's changed heaps. And I think social media has contributed a massive amount to that. So what I mean by that is, like, I have teenagers and they don't have a filter around what they share. It's almost like an obnoxious vulnerability at times. But they nevertheless have been accustomed to processing what they're feeling and sharing it with others. So when that generation of kids become athletes or come into the settings that I'm in, they already have built into them the concept that it's okay to share what I'm experiencing with others.
Yep.
Yeah, it's changed so much. I'll just tell you from a personal experience, growing up, your mental health was almost viewed as almost like a weakness in a way, right? You didn't really talk about it. No. And what flips the switch for me, and this was, 5-10 years ago for me, what flipped the switch for me is exactly what you're saying, is coming to the conclusion that your mind has to be worked out just like your physical has to be worked out.
Yep.
And there's skills that you have to learn when you're working out or in a sport, or skills at work. Your mind's the same way. And once I kind of flipped that and said, I got to work out my mind just like I need to work out my physical or get better at a certain skill at work. Once that clicked for me, it took the stigma away a little bit.
Yeah.
And then it was about...
That's the normalization part that I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's how we normalize it. If it's a deficit model, it'll be reserved for the weak.
Yeah.
If it's a skill model, it'll be normalized to the masses.
That is so good. That was a huge shift for me personally.
It is. It's a big shift for all the athletes I work with, because they've been conditioned to think the way I think under pressure is fixed. And you either have or you have not. And there's not much I can do about it. Yeah.
Well, there's a stigma to it that says, I must be doing something wrong, or there's something wrong with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if you go into the gym and you're not quite there, or you go out on the field and you're not quite there, that's not personal. That's skill related. When you talk about what's happening in your brain and in your soul, that's not skill related anymore. That's personal.
That's personal.
So it requires a deeper level of connection for that to happen.
But it's still, at the end of the day, it's still skills, right?
Still skills.
Yeah.
It's skills. It's definitely a skill. I've watched people improve dramatically over time as they've dedicated work towards that area.
Yeah. And I would just encourage people that are listening, this is relatively new stuff that Aaron's talking about. Like, we haven't viewed mental health, and even though we're applying it to high performing athletes, it applies to everybody, but it's a different way of thinking about it. And it's that stigma that comes down, that it's more about, hey, saying that you need help or seeking out help to improve your mental capabilities is just like you would do for a trainer or do for somebody that you need to learn a new skill at work. And I think that's a very interesting nuance that hopefully everybody's picking up on.
Yeah, the challenge is, mate, we just need to make sure our academics are on the ground in the dirt, understanding how to translate these theories into practices that actually make meaningful impact in people's lives.
Wow, I'm just sitting here taking in everything. I think another thing that's a little bit hard for individuals too is to identify, what do I need to fix and improve upon? I think that's hard for some folks too.
That's a great segue, though. That's a great segue. It's like you've loaded the question. So if I'd approach an individual, I have a hierarchy, a mental performance hierarchy. So as some of you would be familiar, imagine Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's the same thing. So I have a hierarchy that I would work off, which would have well-being at the foundation, then mindset, then pressure skills. And the reason I say that, so well-being I define through the measurement of 4 areas. So it would be nutrition, exercise, sleep, and relationships. And the reason we start there is that if you don't have your well-being right, you can't have your mindset right. If you don't have your mindset right, you won't respond to pressure right. So what we have to attack is the thing that is at the foundation of us fulfilling what we want to fulfill, which is our own personal well-being. So well-being is the foundation of high performance, but it's not the totality. It's the foundation of you achieving your potential, but it's not the totality. So once your well-being is sorted, then you begin to work on your mindset, which is how I see myself and how I see the world I relate to. So very simple. So do I see myself as non-deserving? I'm an imposter. I don't belong here. Or do I see myself as, you've done the work, you should be confident, be proud of what you're doing? Do I see the world as a place of opportunity? Or do I see the world as a place of threat? So right now we've got a whole massive population across the earth who the world's slant towards being an opportunistic place has been really replaced by a place of fear and threat. And so that mindset work now becomes really, really critical. So I've found once the wellness stuff is good and your mindset stuff is good, the pressure skills are quite easy to work with. And so pressure skills have been, what are your tendencies when you're under pressure? Are you aware of them? Can you self-regulate and still perform when it matters? And there's so many options in that list as you could imagine of what would cause someone. So some people feel pressure because of expectations. Other people feel pressure because of potential judgment. Other people feel pressure because of the consequences that can occur if they don't get things right. So pressure and the mental side of life isn't a one-stop fits all. It's a bespoke practice, just like as you would go to a trainer and they would say, we need to work on this part of your fitness because you're actually pretty good here.
That's so true.
And so that's where the skill model allows us to grow.
Love it, Aaron. So let's, on the four things at the base.
With well-being.
Yeah, with well-being. Can you go through, what are the 4 things again?
Yeah, so first one would be sleep, which I think everybody's really aware. NFL, NBA, number one part of money they're spending is on sleep research and sleep facilities. We just know when you sleep, magic happens. So we got intentional about this, my wife and I, a couple of years ago, and so I'm averaging now 8 hours and 50 minutes of sleep.
Good for you.
Yeah, we changed it. We changed our life because we felt like we can't even get close to where you think about mindset. How's your mindset if you don't sleep? Like, it's so influenced. Okay, then nutrition is a big one. Okay, so nutrition, exercise combined. I think the exercise, we do know that there is biological benefits around the endorphins and all that stuff around mental health. But the nutrition side I think is really important because often the mental side of our life and food are really deeply interconnected. So for many people, food becomes an anesthetizer of what they're experiencing rather than fuel for them to accomplish things. And so there's
Yeah.
a massive mindset shift around that. Like, okay, is food something, man? And part of my own journey, guys, to be honest, is I was over 325 pounds
Wow.
once in my life. So I understand the battle around weight.
Yeah.
And I'm down to like 190. But what it was understanding that I had used food as a solace and that I had to rearrange my relationship with food. And even from the aspect of, and I'm big of this, I have teenagers around body positivity and, acceptance and all of that. I still think there is a inward regulator that when we're not feeling healthy or we don't like our physical appearance has drastic effect on our mental health.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So beyond that. And then relationships is probably the final one. Exercise, I think we know about.
Yep.
Relationships is if you don't have your relationships in order and you have relational tension and the key people in your lives you aren't in alignment and harmony with, that effect on mindset is significant. So that's why I probably start with those four, because there's no point going all the way to how do you respond during pressure if you don't sleep.
Yep.
So that's sort of the hierarchical approach that I've seen.
Yeah, for
I've
athletes.
Thinkers.
I think for the individual too, like for me, when you think of performance and you say, all right, here's these high performing, like we're talking about these athletes. In reality, like I want to be the best dad I can be. I want to be the best husband I can be. I want to be the best associate that I can be in my role and make sure that I'm having the most impact. It's really hard to be the best at those things unless those four core part of wellness is there, right?
Well, it's like your foundation's rocky. It's it's the old parable of the sand. Foundations is just a really, really dangerous foundation if it's shifting and moving, and those things are too variable in your life. It just affects so much of how we function.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of people, myself included, where I have not had the best foundation in any of the four. And it's very difficult to move into a space of trying to be productive or even trying to be high performing. And you're trying to push through that and muster through it as best as you can. And people see through you all the time. They're like, you could be doing this a lot better if you just do X, Y, and Z. But it's so hard to dive into those and to actually unpack how do I
improve?
How do I do that? Yeah. I think about our team leads, coaches, store leads, store managers, and what can we be doing to kind of help set them up to have a more solid foundation.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you got some good, you guys probably sell the book, but Atomic Habits by James Clear has been, worldwide bestseller, very, very popular book. And he poses a question that I think is sort of cuts the chase of all of our, like what, sort of like you go into battle, like what part of the army do I attack, or, what mountain do we take? And he asked it in a very, very practical way. He said, just two simple questions. What is one thing that you started tomorrow, a habit, would really improve your life, and what's one thing if you stop tomorrow would improve your life? And it's actually not that complex, because I'd give you a minute and I guarantee both of you would probably have to come up with
Yeah, I have plenty.
Same.
So that's the simplicity of the discussion. It's not about a massive analyzation of all of those areas of well-being. It's looking at those areas of well-being and go, well, how do I transform my need in those different areas into really repeatable habits? And if I do that, change happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's discipline and change. And in Thrive, which is something we do, it's a program we have here at Walmart. We talk about these micro steps and finding really small steps and then repeating them.
I'm so bad at that.
And the repeating is the hard part, right?
Yeah.
It's the discipline to repeat them. But small changes repeated over time can cause great change, right? But it is the discipline that's needed, and sometimes it feels unachievable. Like Aaron, have you dealt with some athletes who just felt like I'm not going to get there? Like I just can't. It's the
or
mountain.
I won't make it in time.
Yeah, or we'll make it in time, or the mountain's just too big. Like how do you work with athletes who think that way?
I mean, for every day you have that.
Yeah.
Like, particularly in a sport like rugby, which I spend a lot of my work at, we've had a pretty successful team in New Zealand for a while, and like the nature of competition is quite high. And so that means that the demands on performance are correspondingly high. And I think one of the things that we understand is like reaching one's potential is for everyone. Operating in a high performance environment isn't. And I think that's an important distinction, which makes this conversation much more relevant. We're not talking about going in next week into the Tennessee Titans locker room now dominating. What we're talking about is everyone has untapped potential that they want to realize. How do we go about doing that? And how do we remove the things that get in the way? And how do we think in a way that will support that potential being turned into performance? That's a good conversation for everyone. But the conversation about the athletes I deal with is sometimes those demands that exist within those environments are really difficult. And we're having to think about this whole notion of the well-being is central, and how we treat people is central, and how do we continue to do that in a really good way? So I guess the questions that I've got in my mind right now, and they're probably really relevant to your leaders, is how do we have compassion? How do we have empathy? How do we have accountability? And how do we have standards? Because we can't separate those. So we can't say we just care for people, but we never challenge them. We'll never get the best out of people that way. But it can't be all challenge and no care. And so there is a sweet spot there that is not fixed, because the needs of generations that come through. So the next generation will have different needs about their workplace in order for them to feel like they belong and they feel like they can function and people believe in them. So it's quite a dance that happens constantly in that space. But I think it is important to recognize, though as a general population we can admire and stand back and have much admiration for our athletes, they are different, and that's okay. They are different. And that difference is formulated over years by their exposure to certain things that are critical for them to develop as athletes.
That's so good. I love this idea of balancing empathy and compassion with standards and accountability.
Accountability.
That's a tough balance, I tell you. And I think, us as humans, we're either all in one side or all on the other. It's tough to hold both at the same time. But I
did some work a number of years ago with the SAS, which is like the SEALs in New Zealand. And they really changed their model to build resilience. So we talk about resilience as a really key word, right?
Sure.
So I think resilience has been almost, along with COVID, the word of our epidemic, right?
Sure.
Or, it's just been like, we need resilience. How do we become resilient? And, the SAS explored for a long time. Their resilience was built mostly, if you can imagine, you got a straight line with care at one end and challenge at the other. They lived in the challenge space, but they felt like their teams were disconnected. They weren't unified, and they weren't aligned under pressure, right? And so they began to introduce, well, what if we care for our people simultaneously while they challenge? And their resilience, or the ability to deal with things that are challenging, just went through the roof. And so we can't just have this opinion that, resilience is formed by when we're hard on people. No, resilience is formed where we come alongside people, we care for them enough that we earn the right to challenge them, and we help them into where they need to get to.
You need to coin that phrase, my friend. That's really good.
Wow. I think about high potential, high performer. And I know right now in stores, in the home office, all of our associates, we think about, so we're categorizing people in high potential, high performance, and then sometimes they get to be in the same, where you have someone who's high potential and who's a high performer. But a lot of times we struggle making that differentiation as well, because sometimes we're like, this person, I know they can really do it. But maybe they're just not there yet, not to that high performing space yet, but they could be. How do you kind of get them into that space while also still utilizing their high potential?
Such a good question. Hey, the maturation of one's potential is why the NFL and NBA spend millions of dollars scouting. Because it's not predictable.
Right.
It's not always predictable. That's the thing. Like we know that there are qualities that exist within individuals that we can say those qualities allow them to fulfill their capability. But I think it's pretty good to understand that there still is a endpoint to capability, right? So for example, you can't outthink a bad body or poor skills. So if you said to me, you're going to run the Tokyo Marathon that was run on Sunday, I can have the best mental game in the world, I don't have physical capability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's my ceiling. That's my capability ceiling. So it's not like thinking well is a silver bullet to unleashing unlimited potential. No, thinking well is our pathway to realizing the potential that we do have. But I think if you sit people genuinely down, they want to achieve their potential. Yeah. They want to, as Maslow said, self-actualization. They want to be part of doing something significant.
Yeah.
Yep.
They've just got all these barriers in the way that we have to help them with to maneuver through in order for them to do that.
Yeah, let's talk about those barriers because I think that's important. I've yet to run into somebody who doesn't want to do well, right?
Right.
Most people want to succeed. They may not know what that means. They may not know what success looks like yet for them, but they want to do well. But there are a lot of times there are things in your way that prevent you from reaching that potential. What are some of those things that you've seen, Aaron, that kind of stumble and get people get in their way?
Yeah.
Patience and perseverance by far. Yeah, by far. Is premature evaluation or unrealistic expectations, I think, derail more people than anything you can imagine. And so, I know this from my own journey. It took me 33 years to grow my body in a significant way. That wasn't going to change in 3 weeks, was it? And so if our premature evaluation slips in, which is I'm putting in effort and I'm getting no return, then we'll quit the activity. So I think it's understanding that, and this is what Angela Duckworth and Grit wrote about, was that, passion and perseverance are the two foundations of mental toughness, which is I love what I do. And because I love what I do, I'm prepared to persevere there and sacrifice through challenges and adversity and whatever may come my way, because that's part of the process. So I suppose for me now, after doing this for quite a while, you do begin to fall in love with the grind, as silly as that sounds.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And you begin to hunger a little bit of adversity and challenge and discomfort.
Yeah.
Which is, that takes a bit of work. But once you get there, then you look at life so differently in that regard. So I think really impatient people who want quick results, who don't play the long game, will almost never, ever fulfill their capability.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something about daily disciplines. We've talked to store managers about, like, what's your routine? You walk into the day and it's Groundhog Day, right? It's the same thing every single day, and they're running big operations there, and they're having, they're running 300 to 400 people in the store. They're big businesses, lots of customers, and it's a company in and of itself. And how do they lead through that? And we find that the best performing store managers have the most consistent routines. So every day is like Groundhog Day. They get in the store, they do this, and then by 8:30 they're doing this, and then by 10:30 they're doing this, and they
Very
follow
disciplined.
that. Candace talked about that when we interviewed her earlier this year, and it's those that are willing to commit to that daily grind that see the results of that. The commitment to discipline.
A great insight you have there, because consistency doesn't just affect us; it affects those that we're leading.
Yeah.
So, like, consistency is one of the number one traits that people look for to develop trust. So, like, I think we've all worked for leaders that when they walk in the morning, if we don't know what we're getting from them each day, the anxiety levels just elevate, and our focus shifts to managing the relationship rather than doing our job. So when someone turns up and you know what you're getting that day, consistency, that means that people go, I can trust you. I know you're consistent, and I know you're going to do the same stuff, and I know that there's not an unpredictability in your behaviors. I mean, that's just gold for team leadership, isn't it?
Yeah, that's so good.
Yep.
Yeah, we see that all the way up at all levels of the organizations. One of the ways we say it is being able to reduce the noise, right? So being the leader in the room that's able to reduce the noise and stay consistent in the way that you lead. And there's times where you got to pivot quickly, but it's typically the leaders that are consistent in their message. They have very clear priorities and expectations, and they are patient to deliver those in a consistent way. That being said, they also have high degrees of accountability and standards too.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think back to those like micro tasks, those small things that you have to start getting in the habit of doing. And it's hard because I think a lot of times I'm so guilty of this. I have this big idea of here's the goal that I want to reach and like this is it. But I fail sometimes to forget that there are small steps that lead up to that. And so if I don't take it one day at a time, a little bit smaller pieces, more doable, then I get frustrated. And then I feel, like I'm in that pressure space. And then those like foundations just
go
shot.
You get shot, right?
Yep. I'm like, wow, well, I need to go drink some
I
coffee.
suppose what shaped that for me is that I can't remember the quote, but I read a number of years ago. It said losers and winners both had goals.
Yes. So
goals
true.
Aren't the key.
Yeah.
Goals aren't the key.
No.
Like you don't rise. I think James Clear said it that way. You don't rise to the level of goals. You fall to the level of your system. So have you created an ecosystem that is able to produce the behaviors that make your goals accomplished?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's where that daily routine comes into play.
Yep.
So I guess my final question for you is, we have a lot of leaders or just individuals that are listening to this that may be looking for their first step to help in their mental fitness, what I call mental fitness, and those skills that you are talking about. Maybe this is a completely new concept for you, where you haven't really heard it explained this way. And maybe you're thinking, hey, how do I actually get started down this journey of working on the skill set to become mentally fit? Like, what would be kind of some advice or last advice or just thoughts around how to motivate somebody to kind of get started down this path?
Yeah, I mean, this is where our skill model requires coaches, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, you'd never go to a trainer and say, what's the one thing I should work on? They'd be like, oh, let me assess you first. Let's see what the areas where you need to, But I'll just pick out one, for example. A lot of people have issues with anxiety, right?
Yeah.
So we know anxiety is a massive issue.
Yeah, sure.
So anxiety is basically, emotions that are produced through the fear of the unknown or the unpredictable, right? So anxiety is often future orientated, and something like shame and regret would be past orientated, right?
Yeah.
So we do have these emotions that span our experience. One of the things that I do with anxiety, people are struggling from it, I ask them just to simply draw a circle on a piece of paper. And in that circle, you put everything you have influence over. And outside that circle is everything that worries you, but you can't influence. And the goal is how much time can you spend in the circle? That's the goal. Because if you're spending time outside of the circle on things that you can't influence, then you're not spending time on the right stuff that you can influence. And I found people that can focus on things that they can influence and they can control, their anxiety does less.
Yeah, that's great.
That's a
great
great
It's just a simple tool.
Yeah, it's a great
simple
tool. And the reason why I think that can help a lot of people, it can help me as well. But the reason why that's important, and I want to just touch on what you said, is you need a coach sometimes. And for you to really know, because everybody's different.
Yeah.
And it's okay as individuals to reach out for help in this area. And we talked about at the very beginning, Alexis, is that the stigma and the normalization of mental health is starting to occur, which is a great thing. And I just encourage people that may be struggling in some areas to reach out to somebody that could provide the skills needed and help you assess on what skills you're lacking and what skills you need, because this is something that you can learn. And I can tell you from personal experience, this is a skill that you can learn, but you do need help along the way. You got to work.
Yep.
It's a daily. It's a daily.
You got to
effort.
know what to do and when to do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And how to do it.
It doesn't just
things.
happen. Just like, hey, I want to get in shape physically, doesn't just happen. If you want to get in shape mentally, is you have to put in the work and you have to reach out for help and have people help you along the way.
100%.
I'm so happy that we're having conversations about this, because I think it encourages everybody to be vulnerable and open up and talk about these things. So I feel like this episode couldn't have come at a better time.
Yeah, really, with all this going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Aaron, it's been fabulous. thank you for coming in. You're going to make a difference to
you're
a
welcome.
lot of
Yeah.
people that are listening to this. It's going to be a big difference. Well, cool, man. Well, thanks for doing this.
Yes.
I know you're a busy
You're
guy.
welcome. Thank you for having me.
Busy guy, and we'll stay in connection with you, Justin. Thanks for making that connection.
Yeah.
This has been outstanding. But have a great day, man.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you,
Yep.
guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
See you later.
Yep. See ya. Bye.
Bye.